Welcome back, and still to come on the show, we're going to talk to the brain guru. Her name is Colleen Lightbody. She is the final interview of the morning, but right now we're going to be talking to Nkini Phasha. He volunteers at SADC, and he's here to talk to us about the blue whale suicide game, and time permitting, we're also going to be talking about Bluetooth, which is another very worrying activity taking South African townships by storm. So do stay with us. This is a very serious matter. Nkini, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
Lovely to have you here. And I must say, when you walked in, I thought there was a model walking off the pages of one of those Vogue or men's magazines. But you tell me that
Thank you for the compliment.
You tell me that you're a medical scientist. So
yes.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and what is it that you do?
Professionally, I'm a medical scientist, as I indicated, and I specialize in hematology, which is the study of blood. So I practiced for a number of years before I decided to jump ship, and I went into corporate. I went and joined the pharmaceutical industry, and part of what I was doing in the pharma industry led me to then get into CNS, which is the central nervous system, or psychiatry or psychology, with my involvement at the time with the company that I was working for, and that then led me to be part of the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. So I've been part of SADC for over 10 years,
oh, wow.
For many years, and really, for me, it's something that is very close to my heart. It's one of my passions. Understanding that in South Africa, we're still really not where we should be in terms of mental health and mental illnesses, and people understanding, that these are medical conditions, and just, spreading the awareness and creating, that education around these illnesses to ensure that we can destigmatize mental health and ensure that people that are suffering from mental illnesses are not discriminated. So that is really has been the driving force, for me to, become part of SADC, and why I've lasted for so many years with SADC.
Lovely.
Yes.
I have no doubt that you're making a very, very positive input at SADC.
Thank you.
Let's just go back a couple of steps and talk about stigmatization and marginalization of mental health patients. Why do you think that is, and what can we do to turn the situation around?
When people don't know something, the fear of the unknown, they tend to create myths around it. So it is exactly these myths that are resulting in the stigma and the discrimination of people suffering from mental illnesses. So the lack of awareness, is what then is also driving this. But we also know, that there are some cultural beliefs,
absolutely,
that also fuels the stigma of mental illnesses. If you look at African people, for example, there's
not only African, also in the Indian communities, Indian and coloured, and sadly, we sweep this under the carpet.
We do, because we are ashamed to talk about it, because why? The society is not welcoming, of anyone who is mentally ill. There are very bad words that are used to define somebody who is living with a type of a mental illness. What I wanted to say specifically about African people, we heard, a couple of weeks ago, our president making really some remarks that are quite dangerous and that are quite unfortunate, where he said that, stress is a white man's disease.
Oh, goodness me.
Those are the type of, perceptions and
stupid
phrases,
remarks that
like that actually, then fuels, the stigma. So people, if you are living with a mental illness or you are going through stress, you're going to then doubt yourself. You're going to then feel completely guilty, and feel, unworthy, because here you are going through something that you should not be going through, something that it's not classified as, African people's condition, not acceptable.
No empathy for the condition.
No empathy whatsoever. And that then makes people not to want to come forth. And also that drives the stigma, the discrimination, the marginalization that you referred to, which is quite dangerous, unfortunately, because we know that if that is left untreated, the severe consequence of that is where people then look at taking away their lives.
Now we're going to talk in a while about the blue whale suicide game. We're not quite sure if it has reached our shores. We pray that it doesn't. We're also going to be looking at Bluetooth. Do you believe that these type of these games of where you're actually playing with your life, these games of chance are linked to people who probably have some sort of a mental condition? Because I can't even begin to put my mind to it that any rational, sane, level-headed person would indulge in such games.
Look, I mean, absolutely. I mean, we strongly believe that there is, some underlying, psychological or emotional distress. These youngsters that have actually, obviously lost their lives to blue whale or linked to blue whale. And we're
going to unpack that in a minute or two.
Yes. So remember, our brain obviously being a complex, organ of our body, but, it also functions in specific ways. So when you are actually going through a type of a mental disorder or a psychological, disorder, your brain is not functioning very well. So therefore, you are then unable to maybe be rational, as you indicated, because unfortunately there are certain hormones, or chemicals in your brain that are deficient. So therefore, that then affects how then your brain functions, which then will make you more vulnerable, to then engage in something like, this blue whale, suicide game. So you look at that as almost as if it's, it's a normal thing that you should be doing. And that's how then, it becomes very attractive, to a person who is in that state.
We're going to talk about why teenagers would, and we're suggesting perhaps they're not thinking rationally. What exactly is this blue whale suicide game?
This, in fact, it was invented by quite a youngster. I mean, he's about 21 years old in Russia. He has subsequently been arrested. And also, we question. I mean, I think this boy's status, mental state, status should also be investigated. He has obviously been arrested. His purpose or his objective, he says, for starting or inventing this online game was to cleanse the society, he says. So that already tells you that there could be, some underlying, psychological, issues or psychological, disease or of some sorts. That has then spread from Russia, obviously into the other parts of the world, into the UK. We know that in Africa, it has made its first appearance in Kenya. And there's been 2 teen deaths that have been linked, to blue whale online suicide game.
What exactly is it? Talk us through. Yes. What is it, and what should parents be looking out for?
It's so basically this game, it gives tasks for these youngsters to complete. So once you then have got this on
and
your
it's targeted
online,
at teenagers only.
Well, it's aimed at at teenagers. As you look at the person who invented it, he's also quite a youngster. So it gives about 50 tasks, including things like you watching horror movies, self-mutilation, where you have to cut this whale into your skin, so self-harming, which we know as well that self-harming is also linked to some type of psychological, pathology. And ultimately, the last task that then you need to complete is where you then kill yourself. It actually states that on the game to say kill yourself. That's the last step. And when you do that, you then also have to then record how then you actually execute that task. So it's about 50 days or 50 tasks that are linked that you have to religiously obviously do to ultimately get to a point where you take away your life.
We're going to unpack that after the ad break. I'm talking from Nkini Phasha. He comes from a medical background, obviously. He's a medical scientist. He also volunteers. He's been with SADC for over 10 years, and he currently works for a pharmaceutical. We're talking about the blue whale suicide game, and we're also going to be looking at Bluetooth, the rage that has taken South African townships by storm. It's not a pretty story, but do stay with us. We're talking to Nkini Phasha. He's with SADC. And you might be wondering why on earth we're talking about the blue whale suicide game. You're probably also thinking it's not going to touch us. It's not going to touch our community. It's meaningless to us. It hasn't yet hit our shores. And Nkini has told me that we don't have any reported cases here in South Africa. So why are we in fact talking about it, Nkini?
You know, I mean, as a South African Depression and Anxiety Group, we really are urging, you know, our society at large to really be aware, number one.
To be proactive.
To be proactive, to take precautionary steps. So at least now that, you know, you've got this information, you can be a little bit more vigilant in terms of, you know, what is going on with your youngster. And then, you know, as they say, you know, prevention is better than cure. To make sure that we are a step ahead, that we don't sit back and really regret that now we are sitting with a number of, you know, teen deaths that are associated to this game. We already, you know, unfortunately in South Africa, I mean, the statistics are quite alarming when it comes to teen deaths. We know that at least more than 10% of teen deaths in South Africa are linked to suicide. So this is telling us that really a lot of our young people are looking to taking away their lives as the solution, you know, to whatever challenges, to whether emotional or psychological challenges that they're grappling with in their lives.
Or perhaps they think it's a game. They don't realize the finality of their actions.
You see, when you are vulnerable, as I indicated, we've got this underlying psychological and emotional distress. You know, it sort of encourages you because now you find yourself in this community. You feel that now, actually, I've got more the confidence to carry through what I've already been thinking about. We know that over 70% of people that suffer from a mental illness such as depression will think of taking away their lives. You know, so there is a very strong association or strong link between the two. So if you are that vulnerable and something like this comes along, it really gives you that boost because now you feel that, you know what, actually I'm not alone. Actually, I can do this. You know, you're getting guided, you know, throughout the journey or the path to ultimately getting to a point where you end it all. You know, so, you know, it is really, really, really very shocking and very, you know, very dangerous.
What should parents be looking out for, very especially with their teenage children? I know the one thing you'll say is closely monitor, you know, the usage of their devices.
Yes.
But are there any specifics that parents should be looking out for so that the alarm bell, you know, goes off? And once they do find that something is untoward here, whom do they go to for help? Where do they go to? What are they going to do?
Indeed. I mean, I like that question. You know, I always say that parents, let us parent our children. Let us be parents. Let us be actively invested in our kids' lives. You know, what we are seeing is that a lot of parents, we throw money, we throw gadgets at our children at the problem, inverted commas. And you know what? We understand that there are challenges, there are social challenges as well that a lot of families are faced with. You know, you've got more and more of single parent, you know, homes. But it is important that as a parent, you are actively involved. You communicate openly with your child. But also, don't just provide your child with a smartphone or an iPad and not know and not take interest in what exactly is it that they are doing on those gadgets. You know, cyberspace is it's a dark and very dangerous. Yes, it's got its benefits, but it can also be very, very dangerous. So it's important for parents to really, really make time to be there, to engage, to ask questions, to want to see what is it that you are doing on your smartphone? What sites are you visiting as my child? Now, some parents might not necessarily be techno-savvy, then where you buy your smartphone, get the help from there to say, you know what, assist me with setting safety or security, you know, features on this device so that my child is not exposed to certain parts of the cyber, you know, world or cyberspace. So those are just some of the steps that parents can take. But also, when then you identify that there is a problem, that, my child is now behaving in a manner that is different, because we know that there's certain signs that you can actually be on the lookout for. Like, for example, change in mood, significant change in mood. They'll want to lock themselves up and not want to engage with the rest of the family, They might not want to take part in the hobbies that they were, previously, really liked or enjoyed partaking in. Their academic performance, will be impacted on negatively. So those are just some of the signs, or warning signs, as we call them, that you can be on the lookout for. When you then pick up that there could be a problem, or even if you are in doubt, then get in touch with us as the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. We've got trained counselors that operate our contact center 7 days a week from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And then we can then begin to assist you. Even if you are in doubt, rather ask than be sorry, and maybe even if you just, maybe being too sensitive or too cautious, rather be than to sit back and then feel that, what, I failed my child. I could have been there. I could have been present. So get in touch with us and we'll be able, to offer you the help and the support that you require, whether you are a parent, an educator, or even as a youngster. Feel free to contact us.
Very quickly, would you, off the top of your head, be able to tell us what would be the type of signs, as far as the blue whale suicide game is concerned, that parents could pick up on?
Remember, if somebody is already thinking about ending their lives, if somebody is already thinking about taking away their lives, I mean, for example, self-mutilization, if that person is self-harming, be on the lookout, chances are that they'll forever be wanting to cover the parts of their bodies where obviously they have injured themselves. So if maybe it's hot or your child does not forever in long sleeves and really covering up certain areas, you should start asking questions. But also we know that already if somebody is thinking about taking away their lives, they'll start giving away the things that they held dear, or material possessions that they really valued. But also they'll start talking about death a lot more often. Their mood will change, as I indicated, the significant, change in mood, persistent sadness, their sleeping patterns are going to change, because part of this game also involves tasks that, will say to the youngsters, wake up at the, wee hours of the morning and do X, Y, and Z, so those are just some of the things that you can look out for. Eating patterns will change. We know that, some people, their appetite will be lost. Others will actually engage in what we call comfort eating. Some will sleep for extended hours of hours, but then they wake up feeling completely tired and they just don't have the drive and the energy.
And that's a sign of depression,
is that not? That is also a sign of depression. Okay. So those we know that oftentimes the warning signs or the symptoms are also quite linked to either depression or a type of an anxiety disorder.
Well, let's pray that blue whale doesn't come to our shores. It's close enough to home as it is. 2 cases reported in Kenya.
Indeed.
Would you know why the word blue whale, for example? What's the significance of the name?
It's what we understand is that is obviously attributed to the fact that the whale will bitch itself, and that's really sort of the rationale behind giving it this name. That ultimately this is what you also are going to be doing as a person, that you ultimately are going to take away your life. So that is the link that we've been able to sort of associate with the naming of this online this suicide online game.
Closer to home, a very, very worrying trend playing out in our townships, and that is Bluetooth.
Yes.
Obviously, it is in the community of drug-dependent youth. Talk to us about that, and I know the health department is very concerned about it. Do you perhaps know if there are steps being put in place to try and contain this practice? What exactly is Bluetooth?
So Bluetooth, as we know, with some of the recreational drugs that, have been, have made or surfaced in our, communities, particularly in townships, is a concoction of a whole lot of ingredients, or a whole lot of
deadly ingredients.
Now with Bluetooth, basically, if you think of something like what we call nyaupe, for example, it's really, I would say, it's a much more concentrated, form. But what then happens is that these youngsters will then take that concoction, they will then dissolve it, and then inject it into their bloodstream. What then happens is that I will inject myself, I will then withdraw my blood, and then give it to the next person to then inject themselves. So not only are we sharing the needle, but actually we are exchanging our body fluids, and which is blood. And of course, we know the dangers of that. That not only are you looking at things like, HIV that can be transmitted, via, exchanging, each other's blood, but also things like, hepatitis. So it is really, really, really very dangerous and very risky to do so. So the whole concept of Bluetooth, remember, if, I want to send you a file, using our smartphones, that's, we sort of connect, but sort of in virtually connection, if I can call it that. So this whole thing of then I take the original, drug into my system, I withdraw it, and then I give it to you, and that's hence the whole naming, of this Bluetooth. So it's quite a shocking and really dangerous way of administering this drug. In terms of the steps that government has or Department of Health has tried to to engage, we know that in some communities they've actually gone out. They've tried to engage with community members. Of course, parents of these youngsters that are taking these drugs, they've been involved, to say, or crying out for help to the DOH. They've set up some rehabilitation centers where some of these youngsters were taken into. But we know that, after about a day or a week, they then leave in their droves and go back into the communities and go back into that habit.
They're so addicted. They are so addicted that it's going to be quite a problem trying to rehabilitate them. But in the process, they could be killing themselves, could they not?
Absolutely killing themselves. I mean, there is without a doubt. I mean, South Africa, has one of the highest HIV pandemics, in the world. So there is absolutely no doubt that the risk of contracting, very fatal, diseases increases in the manner in which they are actually administering this drug.
And that's where we have to leave it. The charming Nkini Phasha talking to us about the blue whale suicide game. Please God, let it not come to our shores. And also Bluetooth, the rage that has taken the townships by storm. And of course, these are horror stories, but we do need to make you aware of what is playing out on our very doorstep. We do hope that that was informative. I know it wasn't a pretty story, but at least inform you about what is going on in and around the communities we're living in.